Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Privacy Conversations. My name is Daniel Solove. I'm a law professor at GW University Law School. I also run a company called Teach Privacy, which provides computer-based privacy and security training. I'm here today with Tracy Mitrano, a friend I've known for at least 15 plus years now. I met Tracy when she was at Cornell. She was doing IT policy and privacy. I spoke there, and I have kept in touch ever since and worked with Tracy on a number of projects, including a conference about privacy and security in higher ed. Tracy really has been a great leader in privacy in higher ed for many, many years, really blazing a trail, talking about these issues when nobody was talking about them. For a long time, even in the early part of the century. She was really leading, and I could count on my hand, really one hand, the number of people who were really doing anything in this field. But she got a lot of other people involved, a lot of other folks to pay attention to this issue, and I think really made really an important difference in privacy and security in higher ed, which I think really needed a lot more thinking and attention to those issues at that time. And I also should mention the latest chapter in Tracy's life is that she's running for Congress. She's running in New York's 23rd District. And I'm really excited about her candidacy. Would love to see her here in DC. She's immensely thoughtful, kind, and intelligent person. So really excited to have you here and wanted to talk to you, especially and get some of your thoughts about COVID and back to school and all the issues surrounding that, since you've thought so much about privacy in higher education. So I want to turn it over to you to say hello and welcome and get some of your thoughts on these issues.
Great. Thank you, Dan. And it's so good to see you again. And I know the fabulous community that you have built and are continuing to build around the country and the world, and the conferences that you do and the work that you are engaged in, the articles that you write, the books that you write, have all been important to all of us to understand these challenges better, especially as technology has outstripped our ability to manage privacy and security at a level that we had been more comfortable in the pre-internet, pre-data days. And you have done so much for all of us to get us into a better harmony with these important issues about privacy and security that go right to the depth of everyone's life and integrity and democracy, as well as being able to use the technology. No one wants to go back. We just want things to be in harmony moving forward. Yes, after I left Cornell, I started a company that I still have, Mitrano and Associates, LLC, and I still do consulting. But in the main, for the last 3 years, I have been a candidate for Congress in New York's 23rd. One of the reasons I got in was because I was so concerned about this administration's failure to take the Russian interference in our election seriously. We still have a lot of issues in election security, not to mention where our administration is on that Russian aspect. But about COVID, let me say that I have been tracking closely what higher education is doing, and even more closely now as a candidate for Congress, what K through 12 is doing. And it is quite a mix. I mean, first of all, there's the basic public health issue. And of course, when we're talking public health, then we're talking about a lot that crosses over into federally protected information. We all know HIPAA. And we need to have protocols that are going to reconcile the need to get our children educated and the need to maintain public health, not only of our children, but of the teachers and the custodians and the bus drivers, and then the families who may have elderly parents living with them, 3 generations in a household. So I think we all have a very large challenge ahead of us, and it's imperative that we, in this case, I'll be the first to say, set the politics aside and really begin to work together in order to find the best way that we can get our colleges and universities moving, as well as our K through 12. I do think it needs to be relatively localized. New York, as we all know, got smashed in March and April and May, and we got it under control. And now, of course, it has spread to some other states. What we also learned here in this experience was that for a time, it does appear to have been appropriate to set down rules, strict rules for the entire state, even though where I live, it's nowhere near or like New York City. The density is probably quite the opposite, for example. But it was a good foundation that we set. And what's good about that related to privacy and security is it's at that point you're not worried about identifying people specifically, revealing things about their health in particular that would be a violation ethically as well as legally. It was just a good foundation and bottom line. And as we're going back to school, I think we still need to be thinking in those strokes that are not going to have an adverse effect on people's privacy. And again, I'll just invoke the protocols that we need to be sure children are protected, masks, distancing, working with the teachers, and specifically, Dan, making sure it's following a developmental model. I don't know a kindergarten teacher, and I'm married to one, who does not get down on the floor with kids at that age to solve a puzzle, to read, to be comforted, to play. But that is a very different environment than a 12th grader who's working on his or her AP history test. So in addition to overall protocols, we need to be thinking about this in developmental chunks. And again, those are things that we can do without interfering in people's privacy about whether you have this underlying illness or not, or getting your name out into a space where it shouldn't be because you've got asthma and so forth. So there's a lot, in other words, that we can do at this general level to protect ourselves without violating people's individual privacy, especially in the area of health.
And how would you recommend schools handle the issue of professors who, or teachers in terms of K to 12, who want an accommodation when it comes to teaching in the fall? Because for a number of folks who might be in an at-risk group or who have at-risk family members that they live with, they might not want to go back. They might find it too dangerous to go back. And at least at my school, GW, where we're doing a hybrid, where some classes are trying to go back and others aren't, they asked does anyone want to teach from home? And if so, why? They didn't really get into the details about people's health conditions, but they said that they might want to know more, that someone just couldn't, say without providing an explanation. But I'm wondering, that raises some troubling privacy issues about asking people when they're justifying reasons why they might not go back to work, to explain the situation of their health and the health of family members. So what should schools do? Is it okay to ask for this stuff, or should they basically just allow people to, without any justification or rationale, say, I don't want to teach this fall?
Now, that's a great question. And as someone trained in legal thinking, I can already hear the issue spotting. So we have the issue of creating options for people so that we can keep them employed. Maybe right off the top, I think it should be a priority of a school district or a university college to create opportunities for people to retire comfortably if they are not comfortable in anything but a distance education setting, to keep them safe. No questions asked. And if you have to, dig down to the bottom of the financial barrel in order to make that happen, I think that would be appropriate. And once again, then that avoids having to ask people personal questions about their health. Then after the retirement level, and this would be people who could retire or are within a few years. I don't mean a teacher who's 32 years old. I mean, maybe if your retirement age is 60, bring it down to 55, offer a nice package, and move people out who we know this virus tends to affect to a far greater degree, people who are older than those who are younger. It's not perfect, but that is the trend of it. Next, I think we should have no cause accommodation. Now, that's different than in the issue spotting, the ADA, where you have to identify the reason that you want an accommodation. And sometimes it comes with doctor's letters and revelations about a person's individual privacy, which could be mental health as well as physical health, somatic health. And in this case, I think that schools should implement a no-cause accommodation policy. Let's think of it as a parallel to voting, where we have no-cause absentee ballots. In New York State, you could only get an absentee ballot if you had a reason. Now, the reasons were broad. I'm not going to be there that day. Certainly permanent absentees. I already live someplace else, but I have property in New York and I want to stay registered there. Those are the obvious ones. But what happened when Governor Cuomo issued the absentee ballot order for the primary a few weeks ago, it essentially was a no-cause absentee. You didn't have to check a box. It just came as a matter of his governor executive order. And I think that's a good parallel for where we could go with people who want accommodations. It's a no cause, because it may be for some people, and I'm just making this up, it may be the deep anxiety that I'm going to get it. Some people have different risk internal scales. And if that is their reason, but they don't have a diagnosis of anxiety or any medical record in that regard, it still should be respected, because this epidemic is so out of band of anything that people our general age have ever had to deal with, that I think that the appropriate way to go would be to have a no-cause accommodation. And then, as you're suggesting, fundamentally, that takes care of the issue of, do I need to reveal? And now what is my supervisor going to feel about me if they know that I have, I don't know, take medication for depression or anxiety or anything? That takes it off the table. It's a no-cause accommodation rule.
And what do you think about the new security challenges that we're facing too, as more people work from home now? There is a lot of personal data that now people are accessing from home, which is very different before, when it could be protected in the workplace and be a little more protected than on home machines that are much, much less secure. What's your thought on what should be done, policy regarding work from home, which I think is something that is going to be now we had to jump into right now without much preparation, but now it's been many months, and it looks like it will be a long time, and it looks also like that more and more people will be working from home, even after hopefully there's a vaccine, and then you can go back to work. There are a lot might still work from home. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that issue.
Yeah, it's a huge issue, Dan. Let's begin with something that's very relevant for where I live, maybe a little less so, except on an economic basis for DC. And that is the fact we don't even have broadband now to accommodate children who need to learn, people who need to work from home, people who want to stay in communication for their sense of citizenship or mental health. We don't even have the wires going out. We don't have the data networking that can do the last mile. So let's never forget, we have to begin with broadband deployment around this country that could have, should have been done in concert with the early work that the United States did to pioneer the internet. Here we were number one, and now I'd have to look it up. Are we 68, 72 country in the world in terms of broadband deployment, meaning that there's 50 plus other countries that now have done it way, way, way better than us. And if people didn't recognize this was an issue before COVID, there's no ignoring it now. It's a huge issue. So let's begin there. The next level is connected to that first level. How are we going to pay for it? How are we going to do it? Well, under the Obama administration, and without getting too legalistic, the category from the Federal Communications Commission that the internet was in this information service that is very unregulated, but it for better and for worse. And the Obama administration moved it over to the utility category, where we have all this experience with telephone and electricity as to how to do an appropriate balance of regulation that does not stifle innovation, it does not stifle business development, it does not stifle profit for those companies, but it also takes public interest into account. Unfortunately, for those who are watching and don't know, one of the very first changes the Trump administration made when they all came into office under Commissioner Pai was to move the internet out of that utility category and then back into this information service category. That means, once again, it is very unregulated. Simultaneously to putting it in a place where we can't help directly work on privacy and security issues, even at the technical level, the Trump administration revoked rules set by the Obama administration to do privacy and security of telecommunication pipes, let's call it. The information that's going through there. The companies didn't want it. They never want to be regulated, no matter what the cost benefit. And there comes COVID, blowing all of these questions out of the park in terms of any management over them, any protection for individuals and consumers, small business, churches, schools, hospitals, blows it out of the park. And now we have COVID that has just taken it, to the stratosphere and beyond. We need those regulations back in place. We need to put the internet back into a utility category so we can work on broadband deployment and similar issues to that. And then we can start building with each of our alliances, whether it's the church, school, workplace, what privacy and security as an institutional matter we will expect of our users. And of course, that's the work that I did for so many years at Cornell, putting together an information technology policy framework using privacy, security as the foundation of what we were trying to achieve. And so that work still can and must be done as well. But you get the layering of right from the bottom of the stack through the communication companies, and then right up into one's own relationship and connection with whatever entities you work with.
That's really interesting. I didn't realize that. I didn't even think about the fact that there are a lot of parts of this country that really lack the ability to work from home or take classes at school from home. Just living in DC, I'm just used to the fact that I just take connection for granted. Didn't realize that we are so far behind in those issues.
Yes.
And especially, I guess, too, that the issue of being connected now is just ever greater because now it is essential for working and conducting a lot of things like education and so on. There's also, I think, a lot of issues surrounding, what, I guess more broadly, privacy issues, security issues generally in our society, not just out of COVID, but just generally when it comes to privacy and security. What are your thoughts on that, and what should the federal government be doing with regard to privacy and security more broadly?
Well, it begins with national security, and the very thing that caused me to leave a job that pays more than Congress to run for Congress. And that is that if we only politicize those kinds of issues, we put ourselves at grave risk. When Fiona Hill testified during the impeachment hearings, I almost levitated off the chair I was sitting on. She spoke so cogently to exactly that this is not political, this is national security. We should be totally united. Whatever our differences are about a tax policy or something like that, we should be hand in glove working on the national security level, because that's the number one role that any government plays to the people that it represents. You must be sure people are going to be safe from external attack. Now, anyone who thinks that the next major attack on the United States is going to wash up on the shores of San Francisco or Long Island or Florida or whatever, come on, it's going to happen through the internet first. You weaken everything, you throw your utilities out, you spin your synchlorons, you open up floodgates, and then, of course, you have more traditional military come in. But it just begins with recognizing the internet is the conduit to our national security at the most fundamental level. Building up from there, if people have faith in our Congress to get a handle around privacy and security issues as a domestic matter, whether it's government surveillance and maintaining the balance between civil rights and government surveillance, or whether it's a matter of consumer rights, more in the private sector. If people think that Congress are on top of this, I invite them to watch when Mr. Zuckerberg goes before them later this month, as he has other times. Just look at the looks on people's faces, or the long excuse they give before they try to ask a question about how I don't really know how to do this, but my grandson. I mean, we're way past that. If someone wanted to say that right when the internet became public in 1993-ish, fine. But come on, we need representatives in Congress, we need senators, we need president, we need the agencies filled with people who are educated at a basic level about what the challenges in privacy and security are as a result of information technologies and the internet. Until people understand what is at risk, I don't think we're going to be able to get to a place to have a real clear and crisp definition of what laws we need to change, reform, or pass. But let me say some of the obvious, and I know that you know them better than I ever will, Dan, but the Electronic Communications Privacy Act, passed originally in 1986, amended here and there, definitely amended with the USA Patriot Act to bring the level of showing for law enforcement down, is a mess. It is still a mess, and we haven't updated it since then. We, once again, have to get Republicans and Democrats and everyone else on the same page. Stop politicizing these issues so we can get into a better balance of protecting individual rights, consumer rights, protecting this country, and crime internally, national security externally. There's a lot of work to be done. So I don't mean this to be self-serving, but people should be looking at this issue when they're voting for their representatives. Are they informed? Do they have a platform? Does it make sense? Or do they leave it blank? If they leave it blank, that's a problem, because this is really where we have violations. We know from Facebook, where companies are calling us all the time. How'd they get that information? When we have national security at risk, a president who wants to ignore the fact that Russia interfered and has continued to interfere in our elections. And before that, I was at Cornell, and I watched all kinds of information by the People's Republic of China sucking it out of Cornell's pipes. Journals, research data, intellectual property. Come on, this has been going on too long, and it remains unaddressed. So at the very least, people should be looking when they're voting. Does the candidate have a basic understanding of what's at risk, and what are they offering as some type of a next step forward so we can get to a better place?
Well, thank you so much, Tracy, for joining me this morning. Really appreciate your answers here and this discussion with you. Good luck this fall. And I hope to see you here in DC. I agree. I really think we need a lot more people like you who've thought about these issues and who care about these issues. These are issues that I think are incredibly important, as you say. So thank you for joining us, and great to see you.
Great to see you, Dan. Thanks for having me. Be well. Stay safe.